Hi everyone, and welcome to the Back to School Developing K-12 programs. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to remind everyone of the cooking competition this evening in the Iowa Ballroom from 6 to 7 p.m. This session will be focusing on engaging children in environmentalism, and our panelists are Susan Casey and Abby Martin. And Susan Casey is a Zero Waste Schools program manager, helping schools along a path to zero waste through source reduction, recycling, composting, and food recovery. Prior to SGA, Susan taught science in Chicago Public Schools. She's also a member of the Illinois Board Food Scrap Coalition and the Illinois Wasted Food Solutions Group.
Thank you. Glad to be here and learn from so many of the other presentations, learned so much to take back already. I'm going to be focusing on, can you hear me okay? I'll be focusing on ways to reduce food waste and other kinds of waste in K through 12 schools. I'll be, just to give you an overview, I'm going to be sharing some results of waste audits, to give you a sense of the scope of the problem, discuss factors that contribute to the waste, discuss policies at the federal level, the USDA policies and Illinois policies that support food waste reduction efforts in schools, and then get into the strategies that schools can use to reduce that waste. So again, my name is Susan Casey. I'm with 7 Generations Ahead. 7 Generations Ahead is a nonprofit, 17 years old. It's located just outside of Chicago. We serve the Chicago metropolitan area as well as the wider region. And our mission is to promote ecologically sustainable and healthy communities. Zero Waste Schools is one of our programs. Other programs in SGA include the Illinois Farm to School program, which also has Harvest of the Month. And we do a lot around sustainability planning for communities, including programs like Greentown, the Fox Valley Sustainability Network, and Planet Green, which is based in Oak Park. So with our Zero Waste program, what we try to do is get school staff and students to shift operations, shift mindsets towards generating that goal of generating zero waste, and doing that through source reduction, recycling, composting, and food recovery. So we help schools with planning. We help with on-the-ground support, like looking at lunchrooms and how students are moving through them, how the staff is using the facilities, and work with that to come up with plans, and also educate students and staff about how to go zero waste, but also why. We also connect schools with local partners, so like in terms of food waste reduction, connecting them with local pantries. We also help drive policy changes at the larger level. Basically, we help lunchrooms that look like this become zero waste lunchrooms that look like this. And we do that with the approaching guiding principles of the food waste hierarchy, prioritizing source reduction where it's possible and moving on down. We also rely on the waste hierarchy pyramid and prioritize source reduction there. Again, we also work with schools on recycling and thinking about procurement choices, which can have a big impact on overall landfill waste and what they could possibly divert. So we're going to look a little bit at that today too. Just want to start off with a very specific look at a snapshot at a school. This is results of a waste audit that was done at the very end of last school year. Middle school, this is just lunch, just under 1,000 students. And this is a measure of plate waste. So what we did for this is look at the production records the school had for that meal And we did this by weight and then measured the plate waste at the sorting line. And that dark blue is completely uneaten food, unopened milk, so that's 25%. Food scraps were about 18%. Leftover liquids, the milk basically at about 9%, and the consumed food and milk at about 48%. So pretty stunning. And this school also serves a grab-and-go breakfast in the classrooms. They also serve an after-school meal. So this is just lunch, and this is just one day. So a lot of waste. And this is the same meal at the school. It just also includes the measure of the landfill waste, which is the gray slice. Recycled milk cartons is the dark blue slice, and the light green is the compostable plates. So the district uses compostable plates. Those do get composted. What that leaves, though, is the 75% of that day's waste was food waste by weight. The total for that day was 450. Again, that varies day to day based on the menu, the weight of the food. But that's about a half a pound of waste per student. Oops. Okay, wrong button. So this is just another closer look. That photo on the left is all the uneaten, unopened food from the day, all the lunch periods that day. It was actually hard to capture in one photo. A close-up look, like I want to point to the 47%, the fruit cups. So what you see there in the photo, that's cups of applesauce and diced fruit, and that pie chart there in yellow kind of combines those two, because at a glance they're kind of hard to tell apart anyway. 47% of those fruit cups went completely uneaten. And this is, again, a packaging choice issue, because those now are not going to be recoverable because of the way those are packaged. They're not factory sealed, so those couldn't even be donated. But also we had 120 milks, 71 bananas, 19 oranges, so again, one day, not including breakfast. So some of the factors that contribute to food waste, from our perspective, the biggest one, I think, or one of the biggest, is that the students just don't have enough time to eat. I think a standard lunch period, at least in our area, in the schools we work with, it's 20 minutes. And so even if the students arrive to the lunchroom right at the start of that time, they have to wait in the lunch line. And then they get dismissed a little early so that they're ready to be picked up. So that all happens in that 20 minutes. So really they have much less than 20 minutes to eat. And we often observe, especially the little ones, as they're coming up to the waste sorting line, their trays are pretty full. They're trying to eat as they're in the waste line. So clearly time is an issue. Also, the second point there, students are required to take a certain number of items with the free and reduced lunch program with the National School Lunch Program. The intent is good. We want students to have a balanced meal. We don't want them taking all the French fries and that's it. But it does lead to students having to take items that maybe they don't want, and again, maybe it's a time issue. And then foods are often packaged, and the packaging itself, if you've got 10 minutes to eat and this item is heavily packaged and this item is not, the student may opt for the less packaged item. Whole fruits, it's great to have whole, healthy fruit nutrition-wise, but some items can be a challenge for students to eat, like whole oranges take a long time to peel. Apples can be hard for kids without front teeth. And then also a lack of understanding about the offer versus serve option for serving food, and milk. And I'll get more into that later. So I'm going to be covering some of the waste reduction strategies that are basically in the hierarchy that we use, including source reduction, shared tables, and recovery for donation, food scrap composting, and recycling. And I've got down there diverting food scraps for animal feed or fuel. It's not something that I've worked with at all his schools, but I was really excited to be in on the presentation earlier today with Legalize It and what John Polonsky has done in Minnesota. I'd really like to see that kind of change happen in Illinois, especially for our downstate schools where commercial composting might take much longer to get there, if ever, with route density issues. So I'm just mentioning that here, but I'm not going to be talking about it other than that. So this is just a short list of some of the source reduction strategies that a school could use. There are many more, but in the categories of food presentation, if the food was cut up, if that orange was sliced up, you could imagine that student maybe would have eaten at least a couple of the wedges. And then, again, offer versus serve. The items in bold I'm going to get into in a little more detail, so I'll touch on that again, but that's a food service one. Meal scheduling, lengthening the meal periods. That can sound easier than it would be to implement, though, because that's tied to teachers' contracts and the whole school day, but it certainly would make a big impact on the amount of food kids actually eat, I think. Recess before lunch. There's quite a bit of research out there showing that having recess before lunch somehow it causes students to eat more of their lunch. They're more focused on eating at that point than going out to play. Sourcing food options, on-site gardens for students, the students connected to their food. There's also programs like Chicago Public Schools Eat What You Grow program that certifies school gardens so that food from the garden can actually get used in the school lunch. So ways to connect students to their food, and also farm-to-school programs, and then procurement choices like the packaging that I was mentioning. So offer versus serve. Basically, it's a policy that it's a way of serving food in the school lunch line. Instead of having all students receive the same lunch and it's just everything is on the tray and they take it, offer versus serve instead provides options for food and students get to choose among options. They still have to take a certain number of options for that to be a reimbursable meal for the school. And in the National School Lunch Program, a meal consists of 5 components: fruit, vegetable, whole grain, a meat or meat alternative, and a milk. With OVS, students can decline 2 of those options, though they do have to take a fruit or a vegetable. So that's great. If you have a school that doesn't do offer versus serve versus one that does, you're going to probably see less food waste at the schools with offer versus serve. It's optional in elementary and secondary schools, but it's actually something that high schools are required to do. And a good source is down there if you look at this in electronic form later. I've got some links there. Well, what I've noticed in schools with offer versus serve is a lot of confusion around milk. Even the lunchroom managers, the principals, they'll be under the impression that milk is mandatory. So I really wanted to highlight, and again, this is a USDA National School Lunch Program guide that this came from, but I wanted to highlight and pull out this excerpt from it that says 1 cup of milk must be offered daily, but students may decline it. So it is not mandatory. And some best practices for going along with that would include some signage. And again, you want to encourage students to take milk if they want it. But milk, like some sample language might be, milk is a healthy option, but not a requirement. Another strategy would include some cups and a source of water as an alternative to milk. So farm to school, there's a national network for farm to school. Each state has a network, and in fact, 7 Generations is the state lead for farm to school, but that's another one of our programs. And its focus is on procurement and education in school gardens. And so the basic idea is that it helps connect schools with local producers for purchasing their food. It has, in the education component, there'd be tastings, where students might taste the food they're going to see later in the classroom and see that later on their lunch tray to get them more familiar and interested in the food. There's lessons on nutrition, and then there's the garden component where, again, they're making that connection with where food comes from. And there's a number of studies on how farm to school relates or reduces food waste. I'll let you follow up with those, but basically they're showing support. You know, kids are learning where their food is coming from, and that helps. Two of the main programs for the Illinois Farm to School program are the Great Apple Crunch, which is part of the Great Lakes Apple Crunch. And with that, again, it's like promoting that, it's getting local apples onto school lunch trays. And schools can provide apples for kids who bring their lunch from home as well, so that everybody can participate. But it's the whole idea that everybody is crunching into those apples the same day. And this year it is it's the second Thursday in October. The program's really growing. It comes up, it comes along with activities that schools can do. There's a big menu of options for schools to choose from. Another program is Harvest of the Month, and the idea there is to focus on one fruit or vegetable each month that is procured locally. And again, that comes with classroom activities, recipes, and other promotional materials for schools to use. And this is just a quick look at some of the procurement options that a school might be looking at and how much that can impact waste. So, you know, you can go with this polystyrene, still very common. Compostable is another option. Even better would be the reusables if dishwashers are an option. And just while we're on the topic of plates, I just want to highlight this best practice, and that is stacking of plates. Whether a school is using styrofoam or compostable plates like what's shown here, stacking the plates, it's not going to make the amount really disappear, but it'll cut down that volume, and that could be potential cost savings for schools, if you can think about how much space those take up in a bag. Okay, now share tables and donation, getting a lot of attention lately. Share tables are basically stations or baskets where students, after their food is served on their plate in the school lunch program, they can leave certain items for other students in that lunch period to take. It could be factory sealed foods or beverages like milks, or whole unopened or whole fruit with a peel. Leftovers from a share table, if there are leftovers, they could be used for donation to a pantry. And it could also be used for future reimbursable meals. So I'll have to say I have not come across a school who has done that yet. I'm looking for some because I'd like to share that idea, but that is in the language of these policies. So they're at the federal level. The USDA came out with a memo in 2016. And again, I just wanted to quote some of the things here just to give you a sense of the language that's there. I think that's really key for some of the people in the staff to see. It's promoting it, it's encouraging the use of share tables, and if not share tables, donation to pantries. It's what it does specify, so at the bottom, it has a nice chart, items that it would recommend for use in share tables. That would include unopened milks, cheese sticks, yogurts, as long as food safety guidelines around temperature were followed, but also items like, other items at the top, like whole fruit, like I mentioned, but also things like factory sealed sliced food, like apples. Again, as long as safety codes are followed. It does say, though, that if there are more restrictive guidelines or policies at the state or local level, that has to be adhered to. Well, for Illinois, at least, and I imagine this is the case in other states, I haven't found that out, but the Illinois State Board of Ed basically used much of the same language in their policies. So again, this is a link up here. If you look at this in electronic form later, you can follow it. Basically says much of the same language as the USDA memo. And again, it's saying these alternatives are permitted as long as state and local health regulations are met, and they should be exhausted before discarding this food. So I feel like that's pretty strong language. You know, you need to explore this, and they need to be exhausted. And it also has language for using leftovers from share tables in subsequent school meals. And it outlines that the operator does not have to worry about it. If they sold that as a reimbursable meal, it is okay that those items get put on the share table. They can still claim that as being sold. And it also has the point that it could be donated. To highlight one program that is does share table, it's kind of share table and donation to pantry. It's Chicago Public Schools Food Share Program. In this program, right now, they're limited to just whole fresh fruit and non-perishable factory sealed items. So no milks at this point, no cheese sticks, hope to work on that. But the thing is, this isn't even widely promoted within the district yet. And it's been in place for a bit of time, but just in that one school year, 9,000 pounds of produce was donated, or of items were donated. At one school in particular, just a snapshot, over 5,800 items went to a local pantry from one school. A big challenge with this program, it's one that when I'm working with schools I try to help them with, is identifying a local pantry. Well, across the city, there might be a lot of pantries, and they might have one in their community, but they might be open 2 days out of a month. And so that really isn't going to be a pantry that would fit the kind of needs of the school for delivering the food or having it dropped off. So we're looking, CPS has weekly markets at a number of schools now, where families in the school community can come to get food. That might be a potential solution for that. And again, it's only limited to shelf-stable food and fruit, hoping to expand that. A back-of-the-house example is the surplus project that Oak Park River Forest High School is doing in partnership with the Oak Park River Forest Food Pantry, along with hospitals and a senior center and a university. And basically, they take things that were not served, package them up into meals, like I think a lot of other schools are doing, especially at universities, and those get donated. So now I'm going to move to composting, and that could be the kitchen side or the cafeteria side. Basically, it's a way of recycling food scraps using the microorganisms. 3 ways to compost in schools. On-site composting, it's basically like backyard composting where you're going to be limited to fruit and vegetable scraps. You got to mix that with yard trimmings. There's vermicomposting or worm bins, also limited to fruit and vegetable scraps. That is a great classroom activity, but it's not going to solve any problems in the lunchroom. The volume in a lunchroom would just be way too big. Commercial composting is great if you have it as an option. It can have a really huge impact in getting you closer to zero waste because it's all food scraps and any food soiled paper, that's napkins, that's compostable lunch trays if your district can go that way, as well as greasy pizza boxes. And then that gets hauled off site to a commercial facility. So with on-site composting, it's a really great way to engage students. You can see a data collection sheet in the center. Those are students looking at a hanging scale. They measure the temperature of the pile as an indication of how active it is. So really good for student involvement. And then garden clubs after school can use that finished compost and put it on garden beds. And so again, with commercial composting, it's off-site. In Illinois, there's the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition. That is a great resource, online resource for things like finding a hauler, if your school is looking for a hauler, guidance and resources. They also have the We Compost recognition program, and so businesses are recognized there, but also elementary schools and high schools, universities. So that would be a resource for schools. This is just a little side-by-side comparison, some of the benefits and challenges between on-site and commercial. On-site can be done at most schools. However, it does require kind of a bit of a time commitment. I could speak to that, having led it for a few years at a school. It does take a champion, it takes daily commitment, but the benefits from that and the student engagement, you know, they get to see the decomposition happening, see the worms on a daily basis, take those measurements. But another challenge is that you got to collect the yard waste and store it. You got to get enough leaves in the fall to last you through the next fall. So it does take more maintenance. Commercial composting isn't widely available. It can't, in our area at least, it's not quite cost effective. I'm hearing stories from other areas where it is, which is really encouraging. Contamination, really, you have to keep a special eye on that. And you may or may not need to purchase compostable bags, so that could be an added cost. But it's nice that you don't need to worry about collecting that landscape waste. I'm just going to go over a few of the benefits. The reduction of the impact of landfills, as well as building healthier soils. So when food scraps or yard waste are landfilled, they don't have that access to oxygen. That's when the bacteria, it's the anaerobic bacteria taking over, and that's when you get a higher production of methane. And methane on a 20-year time frame is 72 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide is. So even if carbon dioxide might be the dominant gas percentage-wise in the atmosphere causing climate change, methane is more potent. And 20% of all methane emissions in the US are from landfills, so keeping food and yard waste out of landfills is really one of the easiest and least expensive things we could be doing about climate change. And so I'd really like to get that message out in teaching in schools as well. Compost can also be used to rebuild our depleted soils and help protect water quality, require less use of pesticides and fertilizers, a lot of benefits there. This is, I'm going to focus now on a commercial composting in Chicago public schools. The program there started in 2014. It's now in 14 schools. This is what a typical station would look like that incorporates food share, recycling, commercial composting, and then the stacking of the compostable plates. And this is a snapshot at one of those schools, a school of just over 1,000 students. When we start, we do a baseline waste audit, and that includes cafeteria and kitchen. And then we do a launch day waste audit, and you could see like that baseline, it was just basically the kitchen recycling cardboard. That was all that was going on there. Everything else was going to landfill. 629 pounds going to landfill on that day versus on launch day 63 pounds. Food share is there in the key, but it is not in the table because this was a day where it was fruit cups. So it wasn't an eligible item for the food share program. This is what the results look like in a high school of 1,100 students. Again, now you see the food share there, and the last one that day was eligible. So that kind of takes it out of the food scrap composting slice of the pie, which is green. Recycling in the lunchroom. If it's available in your area, it is generally very cost effective for schools to divert waste to recycling instead of landfilling it. And often that point needs to be made, though, to administrators, making those hauling decisions and trying to get that recycling done in the schools. You just need to find out what the hauler accepts and design the program, the signage around that. These are the steps we generally go through when working with schools, building a team, doing that baseline waste audit, planning waste reduction strategies together with that team, coordinating the operational changes. That means the indoor stuff, the hauling equipment, and the service needs. Then planning for how to educate, the how and the why for the students and the staff. Then we implement those strategies, we do a final waste audit, but then you also never want to leave off the communicating and celebrating the impact. These are some of the key people you're going to want on a zero waste team. Admin, very key. I mean, you just can't really do without any of these. You really need to bring these people in early. Oftentimes it's the custodians that kind of I've learned so many tips from custodians, and then they're usually the ones that come up with like the solution for whatever challenge it is. So bring all these people together from the get-go. Waste audits are super valuable for the data, but they're also a really great way to engage students. It could be done as a green team after school program. It could be done as part of a class project. And then you're planning your strategies. So again, bring everyone together. Use those waste audit results to look at where you're going to have the biggest impact, or what's the lowest hanging fruit, what's, considering costs. And think about implementing things in stages. You don't have to take off everything all in one bite. Just some best practices about sorting stations. If you need more than one, you want the same setup, the same sequence in each sorting station. You want easy to read signs. Color coding really helps. And getting those posted above the bins. So for educating students, we'll often do assemblies or classroom presentations in elementary schools. In high schools, I think it's really important to give that to the high school students to do. So we'll guide a green team or a school classroom and help the students and guide them in the process of developing outreach for the rest of the schools. We also highly encourage training zero waste ambassadors, students who are going to help others in the lunchroom and ensure things get sorted properly and don't get all contaminated. There are lots of curriculum connections and service learning opportunities with these programs. I'm just going to highlight a few. So with that CPS program, we basically took kind of a skeleton of a program, bring it to each school. But what we found is that with every school kind of having its own culture and priorities and different missions, it really looked very different in the different schools. And at this high school, a teacher integrated it so well into a really big unit in her chemistry class. Her essential question, where does the mass from our garbage end up? She taught stoichiometry with this question, and then all the students participated in a service learning project, some aspect of bringing the zero waste program to their lunchroom. And I just love this quote from a student here, and it's a little long, but I'm going to read it. At my elementary school, we didn't do this. The fact that we're sharing this experience is amazing. We didn't do anything at home before this either, no recycling, nothing. You'd be surprised. A lot of kids do care. Some might do it at first as a service learning project, but once they see the impact, they want to be on the zero waste team. And I just talked to the teacher at this school a couple days ago, and she said she was blown away. She had her first meeting of the year to get new recruits and get more students on the green team. 40 students showed up and wanted to participate. And she said she got several more emails saying, oh, Ms. Krinkle, I wanted to be there, but I couldn't. So it's really part of the culture there, and it means a lot to the students. And they're bringing it home. At Southside Occupational Academy High School, they do on-site composting and commercial composting, and they use it as job training. They teach young adults who are developmentally challenged, and it's their job training. And in fact, they are using this at the Field Museum. So students are seeing composting going on in their classroom. These students have on-the-job training at the Field Museum that also has composting in their cafeteria. So that connection was really awesome to see. McAuliffe Elementary, it's a K-8 school. They are so focused on sustainable agriculture, and it just permeates everything. So composting was just one additional component to their chickens and their on-site garden and their hydroponics garden and their food farmers market that the students run. So back to the steps, communicate and celebrate. Those waste audits are really important for helping you know what to plan for, but also for helping communicate your results and celebrate them. I encourage you to take photos at every step of the process, lots of photos, and then think about how you can measure the benefits, the environmental benefits. The EPA's WARM model, I think, is pretty user-friendly and something that even high school students can do and figure out their avoided greenhouse gas emissions. If you can, try to get costs and hauling costs or food costs so you can share cost benefits. And also the social benefits, the amount of donated food, the number of students engaged. And then think of all the ways to share your school's success. There's newsletters, social media, and morning announcements. This is a long list of some of my favorite resources that you can link to in the electronic version. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. Next up, we have Abby Martin. And Abby is a member of the Green Iowa AmeriCorps. While working on her communications degree at the University of Northern Iowa, she spent her summers with Green Iowa AmeriCorps assisting community members to become more energy efficient. She now works as a Sustainable Schools AmeriCorps member at South Tama County Community School District, where she teaches children from kindergarten through 12th grade different ways to help make the earth a better place for everyone.
So I don't like the whole stage thing. But, so like Tess said, I'm an AmeriCorps member. Raise a hand, how many people know AmeriCorps? Good, so majority. So I did some summer terms, but I'm now completing my first 11-month full term. So I've just been at South Tama I'm going on my 10th month, my 11th month will be in October. So I'm finishing up my last few weeks at South Tama. Show hand, does anybody know where South Tama County Community School District is? That's so awesome. Okay, so a little bit about Green Iowa AmeriCorps I've served multiple different capacities. As I said, we currently serve as a Sustainable Schools member. So Green Iowa is like a whole large umbrella. Sustainable Schools is just a sister to Green Iowa. It's the largest environmental AmeriCorps program in the state of Iowa. And like we said a little bit before, they focus on community education and home weatherization. But my main focus that's like the broad, my main focus is school education. And educating kids how to like recycle, things like that. So the overall takeaway is like in order to kind of change people's minds, as we probably all have encountered, that building connections is the way to do it. So when I started at South Tama, my AmeriCorps program was funded through AmeriCorps and Alliant Energy. So South Tama had really no idea who I was. When I entered the school, the superintendent, that was before our current superintendent at the end of my term, he didn't even really know because she signed the grant for me to come in. So when I started there, people were like, who are you? So I had to start from a clean slate of nobody knowing AmeriCorps and people not even really understanding how to recycle in general. They didn't have any recycling, no composting, nothing at this school. So, but they were still passionate about like helping. Sorry. So here's a little demographics about the school district that I work at. We are probably a mile from the Pocock settlement, so if you can kind of think of where we're at in the state of Iowa. We have some English or some Spanish-speaking students at South Tama, but we have approximately 2,300 students K-12. So you can kind of see the class sizes there. that's a picture of our elementary school that was built currently. So that was one of our newest buildings at Saltema. So the waste team, Junior Trent's Waste, the Iowa Waste Reduction, came to Saltema, and this is kind of, you can see the amount of students that, compared to the other students that other schools that they visited, Saltema is pretty comparable to some of the sizes, but if you can see the food waste generated daily, it was 856. So this is the overall, that whole day, or this is the lunch food waste. And then kind of going per student, things like that. So kind of comparing it to all the other schools, they were pretty high. They were pretty much double. So this is why Alliant Energy was like, okay, we need an AmeriCorps member in here to kind of help this school, just to educate. I mean, give them a push. The lunch ladies were really passionate about it when I met them, which leads me into my next topic of share tables. So Susan kind of talked a little bit about what a share table was. So why is it like free for a student to take? Is because you already purchased it. So even if that student is on free and reduced lunches, it was still purchased. So that's why students can just take it off of their share card. From my research, like Saltema can't donate it, and I don't know if that's other schools in the state of Iowa. I know Davis County is donating theirs, but from my research with our food director, we can't donate it because of the free and reduced lunches. Like they don't know who it was, so that that food has to stay in the school district. So then what I do with the extra food from our share cart, so this is a picture of our elementary ones. We have a lot of juice, milk, we have fruit cups on there, prepackaged other like waffles, things like that. Anything you can think that would be prepackaged that they would have. That's what it was. So then at the end of the day, or like after a recess, if a student's hungry, the nurse can bring the student down here, then they can eat and have a quick snack. Things like that. And if we have an abundance of it that's left over, then teachers can have like a snack day. So teachers take turns using the food. So the food, we don't donate our food, we keep our food in our schools. So here's the amount. So I started my AmeriCorps term in December. With the holiday, December to January, I wasn't really full-time until February. So we started some things going. I had to meet people, had to build those connections, because like I said before, nobody knew who I was. So kind of going into a small school district, being young, people are like, why should I trust you? Like, who are you? Like, do you even get small town? You know, kind of things like that. And after I built that connection, listened about that 10, 15-minute story about their puppy, that is the cutest thing ever, or hearing about grandkids and learning about these people and like showing them and giving them trust, they kind of were like, okay, yeah, give me your ideas. How can we help? Things like that. So from March to May, the elementary diverted 416 items. So that could be bananas, apples, things like that, that went to students to eat, that would have went into the landfill if we wouldn't have had the share cart. In the high school, they don't serve as many students because our high school students can leave and go home for lunch, things like that, whereas elementary students, they have to stay there. I've had a lot of challenges going through Saltema with upper administration, kind of like figuring out like, since my superintendent wasn't the one to sign me in, he was kind of like still confused, lack of education on our AmeriCorps part. So that's why I really don't have stats on our middle school quite yet, because they're still like unsure of who I am. That's with the trust and building relationships. So then, whoops, back up. So then also, I kind of brought up the idea of composting, like, hey, do you think we can compost some of this material? The strawberries and bananas was just one day from our elementary. That was on February 28th. And we have these compost bins, we have 2 of them in our greenhouse in the high school, that FFA teacher was like, yeah, we don't compost. Like, I just really didn't think about it, just didn't really do it. And so I kind of started it going, and we have a whole bunch of sawdust from shop. Like, think of a shop class. So we use the sawdust and then food waste from the elementary to put it, and you can see they're like not very big, and we also kind of wanted to like, it was our test run to see. So we started with that, and a lot of the students' comments first were, oh my goodness, it stinks. Well, it was dirt, you know, so like we just explained more like, well, it's composting, let's just wait, give it some more time, add more sawdust, things like that. So we started March 1st and May 1st, and that's about as much compost. So it doesn't look like a whole lot, but we also had lettuce from the high school. So a lot of the lunches would be like, yeah, I have this a little bit, let me just go dump it in our compost bin. So they're kind of getting the hang of it, things like that, but with how busy educators are, teachers, I'm sure y'all can imagine, composting is something that they're kind of like working on to still keep being consistent, but our share tables are very consistent at South Tama, and so is our, which leads me to our next topic, paper recycling. So if any of you guys know where Tama Toledo is, we have the Tama Paperboard, which is a mile from the high school. So I've started a project with our leadership students that we have these big blue bins that are probably waist high. I mean that the teachers can take their little blue bins that are in their classroom and dump it in the big blue bins. And then two students, they get their leadership hours when they come down, they drive down with us to the paper mill. We also pick up the elementary paper and we dump it in that dumpster that you can see. So then all of that money goes to South Tama Community School District. So that's the easiest fundraiser that this school district gets. And not other school districts have. So Sustainable Schools is a statewide initiative, and my coworkers that have Sustainable Schools in them that are trying to recycle, they don't get money for their paper. But South Tama does. So they didn't know that. They were recycling a little bit, but they weren't really sure where it went. So then I looked into, and they weren't initially getting their money. But then I looked into bringing it down to the paper mill, and so that started. So like I said, our leadership students are doing that, and I just did it from the beginning of last school year, from April to May, and we like first beginning to average only 100 before we brought our paper and collected our paper from the high school, and then in April and May we had like extra $400 to $500. So you could think a lot of people were like, well, it can't be that much. A couple $100 that go directly to the students. Like this doesn't go to like, this goes to like PBIS training. At South Tama we have Trojan Way. So like doing fun activities, get extra fun things for the students to do. So that's where the money goes. And then I'm also working on a community plan. So I kind of drove around Tama Toledo to see, well, how are they like recycling? Like are they recycling their paper? And they are, like they have bins kind of like that are overflowing with paper. Well, that money that gets shipped, all their recycling gets shipped back to Cedar Falls. So their paper that they're recycling like in their portables don't even go to the Tama paper mill. That goes back to the recycling company that they contract with. So then I'm marketing through social media, the school website, things like that to tell community members that this is what you can do to help fundraise. So you don't have to buy that fruit that the bandies are asking you to buy. You know, like if you are just out of that, or you want to help, that's easy because you have junk mail, things like that. So recycling your paper at South Tama is something that you can do. The below picture was my classroom, just to show students that, because they couldn't really understand, why am I recycling this plastic bottle? Like it's just one plastic bottle. I had one student tell me, why is this important? Like he couldn't understand, he couldn't grasp his head around, like, why do I need to recycle them? How can South Tama really change the world? We're a small school. And that's why I kept all of this in my room, and this was probably just a couple months worth of paper and plastic, because I wanted students to visually see that they are making a difference and that they can change the world, even though they were like, no, they didn't believe me, they thought I was crazy. But the student here, he was one of my most challenging students because he kept asking me questions, you know. He's like, what, like why, things like that, and he was the one that was helping me dig paper, and him and that teacher were helping me dig paper out of the trash because students were just throwing it in there when they're cleaning out their lockers. So I just kind of taken the time to talk, get to know these students. They'll be, like, if you're on their side, they'll be on your side to help pretty much change the way. So kind of like overall just taking a step back of, we have a lot of goals that we want to achieve, like as corporations, as schools, businesses, things like that, but just kind of taking 10, 15 minutes to like ask how the students' days are, teachers' days, hear about their kids, hear about their lives, even though like, I got a coworker who's like, Abby, I really didn't care, but then he did it, and he's like, wow, she didn't want to hear anything I wanted to say until I asked about her. You know, so like taking the time to hear their story, hear what they have to say, because building that relationship will then help you get things done. Because there was a girl that was in my job before me who kind of tried to start all these things, actually gave me a bunch of the ideas, and she couldn't get them going. She didn't like take the time to like talk and get to know the people. So that's kind of like what I wanted to share was all this happened because of building relationships with student teachers and people. So thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Susan or Abby?
What VISTA program are you through?
Say that again.
What AmeriCorps program?
So the AmeriCorps program, it's Green Iowa AmeriCorps is the whole umbrella, but under Green Iowa there's Sustainable Schools program. So last year was our pilot program, so now we're entering our second year. So Sustainable Schools.
Are you AmeriCorps VISTA or?
It's not a VISTA program, I know for sure. She just told me it's an AmeriCorps program. It's not VISTA. I think it's not NCCC. Yeah. Just the straight, it's a state national program, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Are there several Sustainable Schools AmeriCorps?
Yep. So we have one in Dubuque. 2 girls work in all of the Dubuque schools. We have one in Waverly Shell Rock. We have one in Davis County school districts. We're working on Davenport schools. So it's like growing statewide.
Does each school apply individually? Is that?
Yep. So each school district contacts my supervisor from the CEEE, the Center of Energy Environmental Education at UNI, and then they meet, they kind of talk about a plan, how they want to do it, and then my supervisor recruits 2 members to go and to work in that school district.
Okay.
Yep.
So there's another AmeriCorps that works in the district too?
Say it again?
You said they recruit 2 that work in the district?
Yep, so there's 2. So my coworker, since I started later in December, because I was finishing up my BA at UNI, he started in September. So I started in December, so that's why mine ends in October, because everybody does 11-month terms. So usually there is 2, but he focused more on energy efficiency with like LED lights, things like that, whereas then I focused on education, food waste, and things like that. Yep, thank you.
Thank you both very much. Very informative presentations. Susan, specifically, I have a question, and I apologize if I missed this, but you stated that one of your tasks is to help the districts identify pantries in the Chicago metro area. Are there any of those schools that you're aware of that have in-school food pantries?
Yeah, not to my knowledge. That is something that I think is happening in some of the collar counties. I think DuPage County, there's a school, at least one high school that has an in-school pantry. And I know I've read about it happening in other schools. It's just not something that any of the schools that I've worked with yet has done. The closest thing that I hope we can get to is, like I mentioned in Chicago Public Schools, they're doing those family markets, which isn't exactly a pantry, but I think it might be about 30 schools currently that are getting food from the Greater Chicago Food Depository and having a market. So I think if we could link up some of those share table items to that market possibly.
We have several schools in Iowa, specifically in Des Moines, that are using those share table items for their school pantry. So that's why the question.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you more about the logistics of that and get that going.
Is anybody from the Food Bank of Iowa in here right now? Okay, so the Food Bank of Iowa also has a partner program for schools, but we'll talk later.
Great. Or we could talk about it now too, if anyone else wants to hear. What are the logistics? How does this happen?
Food Bank of Iowa can't, speak intelligently to their program. I would rather have them answer those other
So is it just food from share tables that's at the
No,
pantry, or
they
out
get
at the
some-
Food Bank of Iowa
They get
as well?
some from the Food Bank of Iowa. They get some from share tables that they incorporate into this pantry. It's not only just open to the students, they also open it up to the community.
You mentioned, Susan, that the fruit cups that aren't factory sealed can't be donated at this time. Is that something that there's going to be progress towards, or is it an issue that they think maybe the kid opened it but then put the lid back on and it's not safe, or?
Right, if they continue to use that style of fruit cup, then no, they would not
There's
be.
not.
It's not something you'd want on your share table. A kid could open it, consume part of it, or,
Yeah.
you know, and put the lid back on, and it might be hard to tell. There are factory sealed fruit cups. In fact, the one district was using those before, but I think it was a cost thing. I don't know if that's something they could do again.
That's what we use, are the factory sealed fruit cups. That's something.
One of the schools that we work, we're a food rescue, and we pick up from one of the schools that does a share table. And they have these plastic bags that then they put a little tab on it. Do you know what I'm talking about? So it's like a little baggie, but it's sealed. Do you know anything about that, and if that would be donatable?
Like a bag of carrots kind of thing?
Yeah.
I don't know about a common item is bagged carrots that are factory sealed, others that are more in a baggie, so that varies, but I'm not sure I've seen anything with a little tab like that.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? I am curious, Susan, you were talking about waste, and one of the most significant factors was time for students. What about preference, sheer preference of the food?
So
Has
you
that
mean, do they
been-
just not like
Yeah.
it? I'm sure that's part,
Yeah.
that could be part of it too. I think, that's a longer process. I think that's where something like Farm to School, where it's, more effort taken, and scratch kitchens are coming back, at least in our area, and that's something that the Farm to School is pushing as well, getting more scratch kitchens, so hopefully getting improvement in the food quality and flavor.
Any other questions? Thank you both so much.
Great. Thank you.